Good afternoon. This brief is designed to share with all stakeholders the proposed recommendations to further successfully develop the strategic plan for the United States Space Force. Strategic planning is necessary for an organization's stakeholders to realize the best guidance for the stand-up of the Space Force. The recommendations made in this brief will utilize the John Bryson's 10-step planning model in order to develop a more complete strategic plan. As we move further through the brief, we will discuss each of the 10 steps and their use on the Space Force planning model. Step 1. Agreeing on a strategic planning process. As the most important step, agreeing on a unified strategic planning process is imperative to find consensus on the need, purpose, worth, and process to develop a strategic plan for an armed service as integrated in all other domains as the space domain. It is imperative that step 1 include all stakeholders, both internal and external. Here we do have the core members of the Space Force strategic planning team provided, as well as the political leaders critical to success, and the external military leaders critical to the success. As well, here we have the current Joint Chiefs of Staff included in this as well. Here in step 2, we have clarifying organizational mandates, which includes the political realm as well as the DoD realm. In this, we have the Space Policy Directive 4, which the background image is the ceremony of President Trump announcing SPD 4, and you can actually see there on the very far left of the second row behind President Trump, there is the Chief of Staff, General John J. Raymond. And in following up, we have the DoD mandates that include the U.S. Space Force Strategic Overview of 2019, which this presentation is based off of. And then following, we have the legislation, Title 17 of Space Force, amended Part 1 of Subtitle D of Title 10, U.S. Code, Chapter 909. And then following, Chief of Space Operations Planning Guidance, November 2020. Here we have step 3, identify and understand stakeholders and refine the mission. The key to understanding the mission more clearly is understanding the organization of Space Force amongst other Department of Defense armed services. On this slide is a refined DoD mission proposal, and here in this proposal we propose the current mission of the DoD is to establish the United States Space Force as a separate branch of the armed forces within the Department of the Air Force, with personnel and headquarters that facilitates mission transfer of existing space units, build its capabilities and budgets, building out and developing its force structure and warfighting capacity to deter conflict and be prepared to fight and win future wars. And here in the background we have the up and coming and proposed DoD organization with the Space Force underneath the Air Force. Step 4, we have what begins our SWOT analysis, identifying strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges. In that, the strengths of the U.S. space systems have historically been superior. As well, current organizations of space capabilities have resulted in the U.S. to maintain position as the most lethal force. And lastly, the Space Force will absorb pre-established space capabilities, units, and budgets. And then for weaknesses, we have 70 years that has gone by without another armed service being stood up. And then military and political bureaucracy often creates stagnation and threatens unity of effort behind programs and initiatives, sometimes leading to shrunken or threatened funding, production, and a production life cycle. Continuing on with our SWOT analysis, we have our opportunities, in which we have recent innovation has returned opportunities to expand ecosystems of space systems and services at lower prices. Within the great power competition within the innovating space domain lies a global challenge for hegemony through space superiority. And lastly, a novel armed service with jurisdiction of the space domain enables an opportunity to leverage ongoing reform efforts to accelerate delivery of next-generation military space capabilities. Here is a graphic illustrating the telecommunication reliance on satellites to assist battalion-sized force structure. Next-generation military capabilities will depend on interoperability through interconnectivity and sharing of data faster than nominal communication lines historically used by the warfighter. Satellite technology has been used in the past for the warfighter effort. However, currently we are experiencing an expansion like no other in satellite coverage and technology efficiency, ensuring that the spread of satellite communication is going much farther than what was previously anticipated, or as well what has been practiced in the past for warfighter efforts. Continuing on our SWOT analysis in step 4, we have our last threats. China and Russia have expanded and sped up pursuit of expansive capabilities to disrupt and destroy U.S. and allied strategic interest in space. With such a pursuit, the United States is at risk of losing its comparative advantage in space, extending to its loss overall militarily. And lastly, as seen in most military branches, projects, or equipment, the lack of unity of effort or finances disrupts readiness, capabilities, training, and responsiveness due to the political interference. Piggybacking off of our SWOT analysis is a highlight of our threats, specifically those produced by China. In this, we have seen through the China Aerospace blog, providing a Chinese industry mapping overview of large contingent of experimental space planes. We've seen the extent of mapped projects that are focused on reusability and space planes, including abandoned projects and ones currently under development. Both private and state-owned company initiatives were examined, including unconfirmed secret programs. However, with this, nonetheless, we do see the pursuit of space programs in space transportation, land space, early projects. Here we have step 5, identify and frame strategic issues. The strategic issues presented were derived from individual variables that would cause the most positive or negative effect on the quality, performance, and reliability of the Space Force. The strategic issues included headquarters location, personnel experience and skill, cost financing, and leadership. On to step 6, formulating strategies. What must the Space Force achieve to make its stand-up efforts successful? Our strength opportunity included funding innovation through R&D contracts and academic/industrial partnerships. Strength threat included enabling the strategic reorganization of the space domain and intelligence community to gain an organizational advantage. As well, the weakness opportunity includes contracting the production of space systems to grow Space Force fleet structure. And lastly, the weakness threat includes establishing bureaucracy reduction through reorganization by Space Force integration of command and control systems provided by the interconnected joint force structure by the assets and capabilities of the space domain. Next, we have step 7 that includes reviewing and adopting the strategic plan. According to the decision criteria chosen, analyzed in the decision matrix, with the low score winning / most important innovation and acquiring space systems into its armed service should be the largest goal within the Space Force strategic plan. This conclusion is supported by the rapidly expanding space domain represented in the illustrated photos, that being the X-40A by Boeing, a recent variant produced off of the 37B, as well an EMP shielded GPS and telecommunications satellite, and lastly, space planes for taxiing to space as personal launch systems for changing space station crew. Illustrated in this representation of the space surveillance network by the former Air Force Space Command, the acquisition of space systems by the Space Force will adapt and integrate into a unified command with reduced latency through command and control integration provided by automated and unified communications systems. These systems will expand the overall U.S. surveillance network by retooling all applicable military assets, vehicles, and units with joint warfighter communications equipment, thus extending the space surveillance network to be more pervasive into an overall surveillance network that utilizes an integration of space domain throughout all other domains. Next, we have Step 8, that includes establishing an effective organizational vision. Similar to the mission statement, Step 8 includes a proposed enhanced organizational vision statement. In this, the proposal took into effect the Space Force Strategic Overview of 2019 and the external and internal stakeholder concerns. The proposal includes the United States Space Force will be responsible for organizing, training, and equipping military space forces of the United States to provide for freedom of operation in, from, and to the space domain, to provide independent military options for joint and national leadership, to enable the lethality and effectiveness of the joint force, and will include both combat and combat support functions, to enable prompt and sustained offensive and defensive space operations and joint operations in all domains. Step 9, in developing an effective implementation process. It is inherent to include all internal stakeholders when developing an effective implementation process, with a further emphasis on continued improvement. External stakeholders should be included in prospective consultation to guarantee the effectiveness of the chosen implementation process. The overwhelming nature of connecting all facets of the U.S. military force structure, capabilities, and assets for increased warfighter response and communications can be technically difficult, politicized, and currently unfinanceable. However, innovation provided by quantum sensors guarantees global positioning, with data exhaust or big data being implemented within the joint warfighter. The duo has the opportunity to enhance the nature of warfighting altogether. Next, we have Step 10, that includes reassessing the strategic planning process. And with that, we'll begin into the different process reviews for continuous process planning. And first and foremost, we'll go ahead and bring up military decision-making process. That includes receipt of mission, mission analysis, course of action, development, COA analysis, wargaming, COA comparison, COA approval, and finally orders production, dissemination, and transition. And as we all know, followed up by OODA loop, decision-making tool, observe, orient, decide, act, everybody's most basic analysis matrix. Continuing on to the Step 10, reassessing the strategic planning process, we have included tiered time interval reviews. The first 4 of these do include proposed process objectives that are not necessarily outlined by the Space Force nor the Department of Defense or Congress itself. And those are included system command for our solar system process that possibly could take 40 years, as well as a 20-year timeline on a possible Mars command, a 10-year for lunar command and branch status, 5 years for a civil reserve satellite or space fleet. And then lastly, we get into our final force integration date of 2024 fiscal year, and then our 1-year organizational integration objectives and our continuation of checkup 3 months and 1 month. as our process continues on. And finally, with a process completion review, as we make those final process completion, we will look back at how we completed our tasks. Did we do it successfully? What could we do better next time? In conclusion, this overview of the Space Force Strategic Plan utilizes the Bryson 10-step process to enhance the strategic mission statement, organizational vision statement, SWOT analysis, and the overall strategic plan. That being said, the Space Force has a monumental challenge technologically, bureaucratically, and with the warfighting capabilities and intel community integration. It has a tough road ahead, but it is not impossible. If anybody could do it, our Guardians can. A possible future research, it does include the Russian space R&D programs. It was a lot easier to focus on the Chinese R&D programs due to our heightened fixation on China over Russia at the moment, as well as our future research does include Space Force innovation partnerships, long-term goals and objectives, U.S. and allied space development contracts, key technology that would create watershed moments in history that would include hypersonics, reasonable single-stage vehicles, and as well as small-scale nuclear reactors. And here we have a picture of our beloved X-37B doing what we do not know it's doing. Lastly, any questions or comments? This will be posted to YouTube. Any comments can be placed under the YouTube posting. And lastly as well, there will be the email here, and you can reach me at any questions or comments, any feedback at all. Much appreciated, much obliged. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.